Hi, my name is Nancy Bulalakaw, and I'm here on behalf of Quiet Before, and I'm really honored to be moderating this conversation on food as social justice. And we're here with three panelists that I'm very proud to present. Kukui Maunakea Fourth from Ma'o Organic Farm in Hawaii. Amy Besa is coming to us from New York, and she and her husband Romy established Sandra Lawn in Manhattan, I believe the first Filipino restaurant in New York City. And that is that correct, Amy? It's not? No? Okay, sorry, my mistake. It was the first Filipino restaurant that I ever went to in Manhattan. Um, but you'll have to give us some background on that, Amy. And then now they have Purple Yam in Brooklyn and also Maalaea in the Philippines. And we also have Anna Bornstein from World Central Kitchen with us. So I'm really excited to hear from your three very distinct perspectives. And thank you all for being here. I just wanted to start out for our audience who don't know anything about your organizations. I would love if we could just start from the very beginning. And maybe we could start with Kukui. If you could tell us the very beginning of Ma'o, how it started, the idea to start it, and also the mission of the farm.
E ulua ua maila ua a kuku maila kuku a mu o maila mu o a la maila lau a la maila lau a kumu maila kumu he kumu ha'ahina ole e ola a e ulu. So wanted to start this conversation with a prayer for growth. And I think as we plant the seeds of food as a social justice action, it's really important that we be intentional about how we water this conversation, the kinds of ways that we nourish one another and support one another as we tell the stories, our food stories, and our connection to our food. Because really, our food is, as many believe to be, I believe, a very powerful medicine. And speaking to many of the things that are happening in our world today. And we are only a small, very, very small place on this honua, but we feel that as stewards of this place, that our stewardship and support extends to all places that struggle to ensure that their waterways are healthy, that their lands are healthy, that the air is clean, and that their families and children and communities are healthy and well. And so with that, I ovau o Kukui Maunakea Fourth, o Kukui ola me kana awau, ku'ui no vaina, o Maunakea Fourth ku'ui no hope no ho'au, ma ke ia wahi o Wai'anae. Wai'anae is a moku on the island of Oahu in the Pai'aina called Hawaii. While some folks regard us as the 50th state, this is the home of my ancestors for millennia that lived here millennia and that will continue to be here for millennia. We are primarily stewards of this place. I was so fortunate that the calling to bring young people and their land together was shared with me, and and that I was at the time able to respond to such an important kahea or call to action. And together with our community, we founded just 5 acres of Aina here in our place. And our mission was really simple, and it's embedded in the name of our organization, which is Ma'o or Maalaea Opio. Mala being garden, Ai being food, and Opio meaning young people. And so it's the young people that grow food and the food that grows young people. So that is our mission. We are organizationally a nonprofit like other folks on the call, but we are a social enterprise. And so sort of like Amy, we look at the market and we kind of see it as a way, not the ends, but the means to an end of bringing food back into our communities, back at the center of the way that neighborhoods and communities are able to, to participate in a meaningful way, in a meaningful life. And today, for example, we have over 100 young people that are working on our farms. They help to energize our farm with their creativity and their love, and they grow our food, and all of those foods are distributed through the markets and into people's homes. And so it's a really, really beautiful way to kind of do what our ancestors did, and in feeding folks, but it has all of these nice other impacts that I'm really happy to share, especially on this panel, because we know post-pandemic, we are embarking on a new future, and we have to be brave, we have to be courageous, and we have to take those steps to make those changes, those needed changes in what is essentially a kind of a broken food system. So that's myself, that's my organization, and my community, and what we're working on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kukui. Anna, would you mind going next and sharing with us, if you can, how World Central Kitchen started, and its mission, and sort of where it currently is in terms of its scope and reach now?
My name's Anna Bornstein. I am Relief Operations Lead with World Central Kitchen now. World Central Kitchen has been around a lot longer than I've been a part of the team. Started many years ago, I'm sure as a dream, and came to fruition just over 10 years ago. Chef Jose Andres is our founder, and people may know him from his work in the food industry and his restaurants, and as an incredible chef. From many of his tellings of the inception of this nonprofit organization, World Central Kitchen, he saw the incredible need in the world and in many different communities all over the world for nourishing food, and a plate of nourishing food, and how much that can do for people in times of crisis and not. Food is something that we need always, every day. And so, it started as a small group of people working together, responding to various natural disasters. Hurricane Maria is a pretty notable data point in the history of World Central Kitchen, and in Puerto Rico, responding to that catastrophic event and providing nourishing meals and hot meals to communities that have been affected by natural disasters, by various different kinds of crises. Since its inception, it has grown quite a bit. I have joined the team, several other people have joined the team. The scope of work has transformed pretty tremendously. So in this day and age, World Central Kitchen is both a disaster response organization. We do have a relief team that I'm a part of. We respond to natural disasters, man-made disasters, different types of crises, fires, earthquakes, with that same mission in mind, to nourish communities and strengthen economies in times of crisis and beyond. So our relief team does that in an immediate response to these types of events. We also have a resilience side of our work that really focuses on longer term development and longer term solutions to strengthening food systems, working with local food producers and food networks, working in the communities that have been impacted by crises and that are more than that as well, and trying to really bolster the local knowledge, the local resources, the local vision of what that community needs and can be, and using food as the lens through which to do that work. So the organization has, as I said, grown and transformed quite a bit since its inception many years ago. And as has been noted already, the pandemic really created a new space and a new opportunity to look at the work that we're doing, the work that we'd like to do, the partners and communities with which we are working. So as we're a year and a half into that being a part of life, the scope of work and focus is only kind of emboldened in reaching out more and building more relationships and more connections to continue improving our food systems and the lives of the communities that we work with.
Anna, can I ask one quick question? When World Central Kitchen started, did Chef Andres, did he self-fund the first response to, did you say Hurricane Maria?
Hurricane Maria was not actually the first response, just a pretty notable one. From what I understand, Chef was quite affected by Hurricane Katrina and seeing the impact of that on communities in the States, in Louisiana. And from what I understand before my time, he did get on a plane and go right down to New Orleans and begin his process of learning how to do this, how to support communities, who to work with, what is needed, what are the solutions that could exist. So I think, I'm sure if you ask him, there are many other moments in his life that inspired him or were catalysts. I know that in that particular moment, he himself jumped on a plane and got there, and does that quite often to this day. So to be totally transparent, I'm not sure exactly what the funding piece was there, but I know that he as an individual, from the very first moment World Central Kitchen began, has been a huge driver of the work, and trying to figure out exactly how to be a mover and a piece of the solution.
Right, that makes sense. Katrina was so shocking, and I think mobilized so many people. It makes sense that that would have been a time to start to figure out. I mean, it's actually sobering how much has happened since Katrina, and that there would be so many opportunities for the organization to hone their response. Because I don't remember seeing something like Katrina before Katrina.
Yeah, I again, I don't want to speak out of turn for Chef, but as a person that also experienced that event, it was certainly almost otherworldly to have something so close to our US lives and communities, and at that level. And I think has inspired a lot of people to start thinking about, okay, we saw a lot of gaps in support in that event, right? And how do we as individuals kind of take up the charge of doing what we can and coming up with new solutions?
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Hi. So do you want to correct me on my mistake?
Yes. You will be surprised to know that the earliest recorded restaurant here in New York City was, from a photograph that, one of the artists that the WPA had funded, during the New Deal when Roosevelt came up with all kinds of work programs for artists. And one of them was hiring photographers and I guess writers to just document everything that they see around them. And a friend of mine happened to get this photograph of a Filipino restaurant. It was dated 1939 in the Red Hook area here in Brooklyn, where the Seventh-day Adventist building now stands, right? So it was called the Manila Restaurant, and there's a picture of men and women dressed to the 90s, right? Like in coats and suits and nice shoes, and they're dancing. And there was a menu, I think there was adobo and all that, right? So I said, wow, 1939, right? But then I sent this photograph to Dawn Mabalon. You know who she is, right? And who's the professor of history, who's sadly no longer with us. This August will be probably her 3rd death anniversary. And she came, she found a clipping in her archives of from a Filipino newspaper with an ad promoting Manila Restaurant in New York City, right? But there was no date, right? It was just a little piece that came out of one of the Filipino newspapers. So we were saying, oh my God, when is that, right? And because that was connected with the photo of the 1939. Then there was an adjacent article beside it that said that farmers were very optimistic about the 1929 sugar crop. So that's probably a 1929 dated newspaper. So I would say that restaurant had been around since 1929. So can you just imagine? Because Brooklyn was port, right? And that was where the Navy was. And so there were a lot of Filipino men who were working, who were recruited by the Navy, and that was one way where they could become American citizens. So a lot of them settled around that area, the Brooklyn Navy Yards. So it made sense that there was a restaurant there. And then, of course, there are all kinds of mom and pop restaurants on 8th Avenue.
Yeah. Also, I mean, I totally spoke out of turn, but I remember Elvie's and Queen's Garden.
Yes.
And then there was also when I was in college, there was a Filipino restaurant on 14th Street.
They were all there. Mostly.
Yeah. Well, Elvie's was right around 14th Street also. So what I should have said is that I think Cendrillon was very different because it was a destination. It was a different way of experiencing the community and the food, and it was really a different experience. And for me, I mean, I grew up on Long Island very much in a Filipino community, and I'd never sort of seen our culture presented in that kind of uplifted way. And so I just to sort of set you up in how you're going to tell your story, I think, you've really pioneered the culture in New York through Sendralon, through Purple Yam, and now with your new place in the Philippines. So I'd love for you to speak to that in terms of being a first in that way, and that it not just being about food, that you were bringing up a whole community with you. And also when you spoke about being an advocate, an agricultural advocate, and your work with farms in the Philippines and your vendors and how you source your materials, how I might be, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like all of this has a very political, cultural movement to it. So if you could speak to that a little bit, Amy.
Yes. During the night when when I was in the Philippines, still I was in the student council, the University of the Philippines. So I was pretty much radicalized already then. And then I had to leave the Philippines because I I knew martial law was going to be imposed in 1972. I had a feeling because I was working at ABS-CBN, and we were very anti-Marcos. And soldiers were coming in regularly to arrest speakers. So I left, and soon after I found myself in Germany for a year because I just had to leave, and I had a bad feeling. So then while I was in Germany, my mother wrote me and said, don't come back home because you're on the arrest list. So I was able to get acceptance in a couple of universities for my master's degree in mass communications. And I decided to go to Temple in Philadelphia because my brother is there. So at least somebody was going to support me. So while I was there and taking my, graduate studies, I got hooked up with a very left-wing group called the Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino, Union of Democratic Filipinos. And we were pretty much left-wing. And so I've totally internalized all of that, right? Like, justice, equality, a deep analysis of society, where the ills come from. And, so all of those are so internalized that, even after I left the movement, because, there was just too left-wing already, it's too bad, right? It just proves to me that values and all the things, all the analysis, you don't throw them out. I mean, people get insane. So, and people make mistakes and take wrong turns along the way, but you carry those values with you wherever you go. So then I went to Wall Street, and then after Wall Street, I was able to accumulate enough money. So then we opened up our restaurant. And when we opened up we had no idea what we were headed for, right? I mean, it was just like, life is too short. I no longer want to work 9 to 5 for somebody. I want to work where when I wake up in the morning, I am happy. So then, this is, whenever somebody asks, why did you open a restaurant? And my answer is always to save my life, So, and for the two of us, Romy and me, that was it, right? That we are now in an environment that we totally control ourselves. And so, like, the way we handle the restaurant is like, you start with employees, you treat everybody well. you know, you treat your customers honestly. And, you know, like by the food that we serve is like there's nothing poisonous in there, you know. So everything, that's how we practiced it, right? And then we were in Sandrian for 13 and a half years. And at a certain point, you know, so how much more can you promote this food, right? Unless you go home to the Philippines. So it was, you know, when I started returning to the Philippines, because I didn't go home for 20 years. So I left 1972. So like around 1990, I started coming back because Marcos was no longer there. So then I started traveling around the country. And then of course, every time I would go home, I would come home depressed because of what I see in that, you know, it's just the corruption and, you know, the lives of the people. And then somewhere like around 2003, I got a book contract with Stuart Taborin Chang, which is now Abrams. So part of that was I went home in 2003, I think, to do research on the book. And then I told myself, you are going home to see the good things. You are not coming home depressed. So I just turned my brain upside down. I went and looked for everything that would make me happy in that country. And so many things. People, Filipinos never complain. You go to the poorest, I went, you know, we knocked on doors, we drove in like muddy, I mean, we went to the poorest sections of towns because I wanted to find out how they cooked their food, right? And because no matter how poor you are, you cook. Because there's food around you, right? It's not like they're not in an urban setting. There's everything grows there in the tropical country, right? And you see, you know, I remember this man who, you know, who when we knocked on his door, he was like even surprised that we were there. And, you know, we were strangers and he opened up his, and, you know, he opened up his door and said, oh, you know, somebody told us that you are the best person to cook this type of specialty. And this was in Bicol, right? It's this taro leaves cooked in coconut milk, right? And, you know, it's very strange. You go from, you know, you go down that province of Bicol, you can see how like rich areas would, the way they would cook that specialty, they would put some shrimp or some pork. And then, you know, then as you keep going down, it keeps getting poorer and poorer. So it's like taro leaves wrapped in just taro leaves, right? So no more shrimps or meat or anything. And it's all in coconut milk. And then we said, oh, you know, I'm from New York. I'm doing a book. I'm learning about this dish that you're cooking. I heard you're the best. You should have seen him. He was transformed. He was like a king. He went on about what kind of taro leaves you have to look for, where they grow, because otherwise you will get like itchy, you know, if you get the wrong one. And this is, you know, and then I that's when I realized, right? Like, you cannot take away the dignity of these people. And you do it through food. You show them that you recognize their worth and their contribution to people. And the knowledge that they have is very valuable, that we'd really like to get it. And they have it because they live next to it. And it was so beautiful to see that look on his face, and that the fact that he recognized his worth, right? So that's basically my mission, right? I want to communicate to as many Filipinos as possible that every single person knows something about this culture and about this food that they can teach everyone and be proud of it. So that's basically what I do, you know. And then when I started, my mother passed away like in 2012, and the childhood home in Maalaea, which is one of the oldest uh, districts in the Philippines, in Manila. Our home is there. It's about as old as me. It was I'm 70, so people call it an ancestral home, and I said no, I'm not that old. It's my childhood home, and it's such a beautiful house. And my family, my brothers and I decided that how do we keep the spirit of my parents alive and not let this house just die? So we decided to turn it into a private dining area, right? And that's where all my frustrations about cooking using local indigenous ingredients, I just pour it out there. And unfortunately, when I started coming home, like around like 2000, like, the early 2000, 2010, the prevailing attitude in the industry there was that, you try to import as many foreign things as possible, and that's your source of pride, right? Like, oh, I have foie gras, I have the best steaks from the United States and all that. But I said no. I am going to make people proud that we have the best pagoong, the best fish sauce, the best vinegars, the best mangoes, and it took a while, right? But people are now into it, and so I tell my customers there, I can guarantee you the ingredients that we use. First of all, I'm not going to give you anything that I will not put in my body. And the reason I know that what I'm giving you is good is because I know those suppliers, I know those farmers. I've been to their farms, and they have the same values and the same, aims and goals that I have. So it's a great community, and too bad the pandemic just stopped it for a while. I can't serve dinner, but we're doing takeout to go. So our pastries are taking off there, and we use we still use, like we do a very good buko pie, the young coconut pie. And we use several stages of the coconut, and we use two kinds of purple yam. We put ube halaya at the bottom. That comes from Benguet. And then our thickener, we don't use cornstarch. We use nipa starch from Maguindanao. It's so expensive. But then, it's like $10 for a kilo, right? But because of that, we're supporting a community there, and now they have regular income now, so they can keep producing it. So, that's what makes it worthwhile there.
Amy, that I feel like I just heard a whole like bedtime story. That was amazing. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know about the 1930 restaurant.
Neither did I until somebody sent me that photograph. At first, I thought we were the first Filipino restaurant in Brooklyn, right? I was like, and then somebody sent me that photograph. I said, humility. You get some humility here, but
it's always good. Always good.
Yes.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay.
Yes. So much
Kukui,
resonance.
I feel like I'd love to turn to Ma'o, and if you could share kind of that atmosphere in a way, if you could tell us about Waianae and the story of Waianae and the community there, and how Ma'o is very much intertwined um, with the community.
Yeah, mahalo nui. So I feel like um, Amy, you and I were just sort of like talking story as the farmer and the restaurant and more, because our histories are intertwined in so many different ways with our Filipino community and their diaspora to as far as Hawaii and here on the Waianae coast. And we have we share there's so much that resonates. I think the part of your story about sort of people being being the they have a kuleana, they have a stewardship of their stories and their lived experiences, and then being able to share those lived experiences throughout their life. And we talk about it as mo'oku'auhau and then mo'olelo, and your mo'oku'auhau is your your history and your lived experience and all of your connections through the various generations. But then how do you apply that into your life today? And I feel like so much of your pattern is similar to ours, where we're looking in our community and sort of unable to dislodge or disrupt the sort of the intergenerational cycle of poverty, or and those are things, right, that kind of were placed on us as a people, as Hawaiians colonized, with our sovereignty, taken from us by force. And I know that is a political sort of climate that that we in our spirit of aloha and wanting to share our resources really stripped us of a lot of not just our voice, but really our rights. And so where in your situation, you just knew something was going to happen, you had to leave, right? For us, it was really important, and that the ability for us to be able to stay and address the things that were happening in our community, the usual things that poverty brings. I think as Kanaka Maoli, as Native Hawaiians, there's there's history that's informing our current status, but there's also our current status as wards of the state of Hawaii that made it very difficult for us to be able to experience our own self-sufficiency and self-determination, and that is really at the heart, I think, of why a place like Ma'o exists. Is we're trying to carve out not just an economic opportunity, but really a social and educational opportunity, and that ties so much into I hear what you channeling those values and those life experiences into something more in order to give back. And so at the time when Ma'o was being established, there was a lot of community empowerment, but it was still the government saying, hey, you guys plan what sustainability will look like in your community. And so it was very half-hearted, and there was very little follow-up or opportunities for us to pursue. But luckily, we felt that we needed to provide a different experience for our children. Our children were really not doing well in the education system, and so our idea was really about like changing that education status quo, and just not really changing it, but just adding more community to that education. And so the idea of a community farm, and marrying these really two important assets, or vai at the time, was really about our young people having this experience with their lands. And with land, the way that you explain, our plants and our foods that we grew, is really actually a really important and formative experience that we can now provide, because the land is there, and the land is not exclusively for tourism, or exclusively for the military, or exclusively for exclusive. It's something that that relationship back to the land was restored through the organization. So but I believe our story is universal. I believe that a lot of the disconnects that we have from our lands and our places is also the opportunity. And so our opportunity came in the form of this social enterprise, and being able to now kind of address these more systemic issues, and understanding that there's the time for that movement building, and to vocalize and to be counted in the political arena, but there's also the work itself. And so that hana nui and that dailiness of growing our food and making sure that it gets to wonderful producers like you and other organizations is like the most important thing for us, because without that relationship that we have with our markets and our restaurants, right, we wouldn't our purpose would be less clear. And so the young people, we're now an intergenerational organization, and so the young people feel a lot of the kuleana, and they fulfill that leadership and stewardship purpose really well, and they're doing that in a much more systems way. And the last thing I think that your story really resonated for me is that we have to have a place to channel those frustrations so that they can be productive. And I love the idea of giving back to our communities, and like the example of paying a little bit more, but knowing it's being sourced and in a way that is adding value to the environment, adding value to that family or business, and it's building relationships and networks amongst us versus being exploited. So I think many of the things that you shared are very similar for us here at Ma'o.
I just wanted to sort of highlight some things. I got to visit Ma'o, I guess about 10 years ago. And part of that happened because my family was living there for my husband's job. And at the Hawaii International Film Festival at HIF, I don't know if it's Honolulu International Film Festival, they screened the film No Hoheva by Keala Kelly. And so it was my first time in Hawaii, and that film, I got to see it when we were, in the first few weeks that we had moved there. And No Hoheva is about the sovereignty movement, the Native Hawaiian sovereignty movement. And so that really shaped how I approached living in Hawaii. And I really wanted to learn anything I could about that political struggle, but also how to support the Native Hawaiian community. And so I did my best to ask questions, and those questions led me to Ma'o. And while I'm not in the food industry, I am in the museum and not-for-profit world, and I have never encountered anything like Ma'o. And back then, I think that what was so exciting was that there was this very like a very infectious energy coming from you, Kukui, and Gary, in how you were approaching everything, how you were approaching your partnerships with the restaurants on the island, how, you know, you seem to be bursting with program ideas and workshops, and the CSA that you established, and we became part, we took part in the CSA. But, you know, the heart of Ma'o is, just to highlight it, is that, and let me know if this isn't the program now, Kukui, but that the farm employs youth from the neighborhood, and that they do a 2-year internship or residency.
That's right.
The farm. And then if they complete their residency, and they also have to do a project that serves YNI, right? They have to do a neighborhood, something that serves their community. And if they if they complete that residency, then you pay their tuition to college.
We do.
Right.
That is true.
And yeah, and I, you know,
I forgot about that.
You
Thanks
forgot?
for reminding me. No, I didn't.
I mean,
there's so much to tell, you know. I mean, so I'm a person like you, like sort of, you know, explores a topic, you know, and then sort of process that experience later. You know, we're so in it right now. It's amazing to see that these young people, since that time, you know, really the pathway has broadened, deepened into workforce, and the sort of the beginnings of formalizing that first experience in our internships. So it's very similar to World Kitchen, where, you know, they complete the program, but now there's a +2 program, and then there is an employment pathway, because we understand the sustainability, you know, here on an island. I mean, when we're talking about climate resilience and man-made, you know, man-made disasters, and all of those kinds of issues, those are 100-fold for us in Hawaii because of our distance in the Pacific. And so, you know, on any given day, we only have about 2 weeks supply of food. And so it's really, you know, I cannot emphasize the importance of this work of building this more a more resilient food system. But it branches out beyond food. And the cool thing, right, is that, you know, our koko, our bloodline tells us that this is a place that we've been before. We are able to grow good food for our community. 1 million people, 2 million people, we've done this before. And so, you know, leaning into that, the indigenous wisdom that is all around us, and maybe it was disrupted, the practice, the language, all of these things may have been disrupted, but just as, you know, we feel the pandemic in our bones and what happened, you know, as a result of the pandemic, we also are experiencing the resilience of that moment of crisis, and we survive, and we can thrive again. So, you know, one of the ways is absolutely through creating these wonderful experiences for youth. But we say that it is not about college, and it is not even about the farm experience. It's really about empowering, you know, yourself to be the best person that the world needs, you know. So how can we do that more together? And I'm thinking, Amy, oh my gosh, I need to talk with you about how we like inspire these young people to be entrepreneurial like you, and really rely and be confident in their ancestry, in what they know, you know, and what their families know, and what we all have known for generations, and to be confident in that and to express that somehow. Open a restaurant, open a farm, you know, start an organization. And that is exactly what we did. We, Gary, you know, as a community development person, and I was a teacher, and we said we could do better. And so just, you know, and we needed the support of other entrepreneurs. And that's why I love this venue, because, you know, I'm being re-inspired all over again.
Thanks, Kukui. That, you know, for me brings up a story that I heard about World Central Kitchen, and Anna, this was actually a question that I had before. So I know that World Central Kitchen responds to disasters, but then when we were in the process of planning Quiet before the series that started out as a way of looking at trying to understand the anti-Asian violence that had suddenly bloomed this year post-COVID. So we were talking to people, and I was talking to the executive directors at Lower East Side Girls Club, and we were talking about how they were surviving through COVID and how they were serving their girls. And they told me a story about how World Central Kitchen came in and supported their efforts to provide meals for their after-school programs that served girls on the Lower East Side. So, Anna, I guess, how does supporting how does that fit in with World Central Kitchen? How does World Central Kitchen determine who they can help? And if you could talk a little bit about the Lower East Side Girls Club collaboration, I'd love to hear more about it.
Yes, certainly. And I am so sorry I keep having to point at you guys when I unmute. But first of all, just thank you both and all for the incredible stories and all that I'm already learning on this panel. So very humbling to listen to and learn from. To begin answering your question, you know, I think one of the themes that I'm hearing from everyone here, and that I'm certainly practice in my work and in World Central Kitchen we practice, is learning from the communities that we're in, the partners that we're working with. I think we listen a lot when we're trying to determine who to work with or where we're going to activate or how we're going to activate. It looks different every time. It looks different all over the world. Each community is unique. Each circumstance is unique. So that process of determining is unique each time as well. When the pandemic, our work with the Lower East Side Girls Club came with the pandemic, I suppose, or in response to the pandemic. So this particular crisis and global crisis that we've all been experiencing really catalyzed a lot of new partnerships and a lot of new creative ways of approaching food access, and how different communities were going to keep having access, keep procuring this life-saving and nourishing thing, food, right? So not to harp on this too much, but I think a lot of what we do is try to come in and understand what's already going on, what's already being done, what resources are already being tapped into, what networks are already being utilized, and what collaboration already exists, and really just kind of come in and support the continuation of that, right? So the Lower East Side Girls Club was really, like many other communities that we worked in that we've seen all over the world, the second we, I think, began to have an understanding that, oh, this is going to impact everyone. And for a long time, people really jumped into action. Restaurants sprung into action. Organizations really pulled on their community and their processes to think about how do we translate this now, our mission and our work, to this kind of unprecedented time that we're thinking about. Specifically with the Lower East Side Girls Club, one of the things that has also been brought up now a couple times is dignity, and how you, this word is sometimes overused, but how you empower people to be supporting themselves and carry themselves forward. And Lower East Side Girls Club was an incredible example of that. What World Central Kitchen is typically known for is providing hot meals and prepared meals already. And we did a lot of that through the pandemic, working with incredible restaurant partners to produce hot meals that were going out to folks. Another piece that came from this experience was providing produce boxes and food boxes. And that was a lot of our work with Lower East Side Girls Club in New York, was providing resources for folks to be able to cook themselves and take home with them healthy and nourishing ingredients to prepare meals that were culturally appropriate, that were appropriate to dietary restrictions of their particular families, or just the taste of what their kids might like, what their kids might not like. So I think that particular partnership brought two things together. It brought the need for nutritious food on a consistent basis, and it brought that agency to people to be able to continue supporting themselves. And there's certain resources that we were able to offer, these boxes of produce, and the rest was, you're an empowered person, you're an empowered individual, community, family, you know what you need. Allow us to offer what we can to support you in achieving what you need. To the piece of the tensions that we've seen arise, and social tensions that we've seen arise, we know New York City is a very diverse place. The state is a very diverse place. We were serving several different communities and populations across New York City, and even in each neighborhood, right? There's huge amounts of diversity there. I think something that can be challenging is how you organize that, how you bring all of those cultures and all of those behaviors together, cultural sensitivities or cultural needs together in one space and serve everyone equitably, right? That's a huge conversation across resources and across space, particularly in food. How do we equitably source food? How do we equitably deliver and distribute food? I wasn't present at our work with Lower East Side Girls Club, but I certainly was kept abreast of what an energizing space that was with that focus. Okay, we have a lot of people that are in need here, and we have limited resources, as we all do, and as we know exists in the world. That partnership brought an incredible joy to the work that's going on there. And regardless of weather, rain, shine, people were exhausted. We know the pandemic was exhausting, but I think seeing that outpouring of several different communities, recognizing where resources were, what people needed, listening again to, okay, this system isn't working. Okay, how do we restructure? Lower East Side Girls Club had incredible volunteers that were there listening to their constituents, their communities. Is this system working? Is this line system working? No, it's not. Okay, let's adjust. Are the ingredients of this produce box, are they satisfying? Are they working for what your household needs? Are they working for the recipes that you are used to cooking? Okay, let's adjust. So I think that is an approach that World Central Kitchen brings to all of our projects. Adaptability. How do we adapt to this now? How do we listen to what's needed and what's working and what's not working? How do we see and observe what's going on in a socio-political climate and understand how we need to adapt there to best serve the people in what they need? So I think Lower East Side Girls Club was a really prime example of all of those things coming together in one place and really targeting a community with what they needed, with dedicated volunteers, with something that could be adjusted and work for everybody and the needs that they had there.
Would you be able to give us some insight on, were there many collaborations across the city like Lower East Side Girls Club going on at the same time? Or I guess how I think I asked this before, but do you know how it's determined who Central Kitchen is able to collaborate with?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. There were many, 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 many different collaborations like that going on. New York City is such a ripe landscape for partnerships, for organizations, for restaurants, for opportunities for people in need. We had a huge response in New York City and all the different boroughs and neighborhoods, working with several different local agencies, local organizations, things like Lower East Side Girls Club, also with government, New York City government, trying to figure out that partnership. Similar projects all across the country in several different cities, DC, Oakland, Miami, LA, smaller towns. In terms of how we determine where to work or how we work, again, I think a lot of our mission is to be as locally led as possible. So there are certainly instances, particularly after catastrophes or something like a hurricane, where a lot of our resources are brought or utilized to accomplish the goal of producing food and getting it out to people that are in need, right? At least in that initial acute response. We are fortunate enough to have resources to be able to send people, send materials, send ingredients we may need. But really, the goal is to try to, if that's what's happening, transition that as quickly as possible into locally led, locally sourced resources, knowledge, wisdom, as that word has come up so often. And so I think that is a big factor in kind of determining how we work or where we work. Is, okay, what's there? Are there, at the beginning of the pandemic and throughout, just constant kind of calls for support, calls for collaboration. And really, I joined World Central Kitchen just as the pandemic was beginning. And so I was there from the beginning of all of that to now and hopefully beyond. Not once, especially in the beginning, do I think we ever met a request like that with, we can't. It's a how do we? That looks different every time. I know I've said that a lot, and the it depends answer isn't very satisfying, but it looks different every time. And I think how we do it, for how long the work goes on, what forms it takes throughout its lifespan, is really determined, again, kind of by the community that we're working with, the partners that we're able to partner with, what their capacity is, what their resources are, what their vision is for the particular project. It could be that they want to support for a couple of days or for months. And so how can we facilitate their vision?
So does that mean that World Central Kitchen responds to requests for help? Is that?
Depending on the circumstance, right? I mean, we have a pretty small team, and we try to monitor as much as we can what's going on globally, domestically, in our own communities. I think disaster response and natural disaster response tends to be a bit different. There's circumstances that we can predict to some extent. We can monitor hurricanes. We can kind of see where that's going to happen and offer our support, offer our services. There are something like an earthquake you can't necessarily predict. So if there's a need, I think recognizing our utility in moments of need, and when perhaps we're not the right fit for that, I think is an important part of the work too, and an important part of social justice work is, right, recognizing how what your utility may be and what it may not be, and who may be best suited to do that work instead. And so I think we do a lot of that work as well, trying kind of intaking information about what might be needed, or requests coming in, or folks saying, you might be interested in working here or interested in this organization, and kind of doing an analysis of, okay, what's our mission? What are our resources? What's going on there? Is that the right fit? And if not, how can we facilitate support that may not be directly with us, but still helps to accomplish the mission.
I mean, it was such an incredible story that Jenny Dembrow shared about the partnership. And so as some background, Lower East Side Girls Club provides meals for the girls that are in their after school program. And the girls that are in the after school program are mainly Black and brown girls. And when the pandemic hit, that was a big thing for New York City. Kids that were in public schools lost access to for many, the only meal that they would have in a day. And so I think Lower East Side Girls Club had to try to solve for that in the middle of a pandemic. And that's when World Central Kitchen came in and helped to kind of boost their ability to make meals. And it was so successful that they started to offer meals, not just to their girls, but to the surrounding community. And so they put it out there that if people in the adjacent neighborhoods needed meals, they were going to try to provide those meals. And so where Lower East Side Girls Club is, there's also something that Jenny said that she didn't realize until they started to do this work, that there was a large population of Chinese elders who were living in the housing projects that their girls were also part of, and that Jenny just didn't realize what the communities they were directly touching really looked like until they started to try to serve through providing food. And so the response was very enthusiastic, and people signed up for the meals, and they would offer to have, I guess people had to pick them up from LESG. And they encountered issues because the community lining up was very diverse, and lots of, sort of the precursor to anti-Asian violence. They started to see online, these racial conflict. And so they had to solve for that. They had to figure out how to, and so then it had to be sort of like a timed pickup. But, for them, it was a very joyful process to be able to offer those meals, to be able to connect with their community, and also and to learn about their community. And at the time that I talked to Jenny, which was maybe like a couple of months ago, they had at that point served 70,000 meals. And I was really just very touched by the story. And so that sort of takes me back to what Amy and Kukui were speaking to in all of this, in doing things carefully, in making sure to empower communities rather than exploit, to taking the extra step of, paying more to certain vendors. And so this is a question for whoever would like to answer. When you're thinking that way, are you thinking of how to maintain your sustainability? So if you're paying $10, if you're paying that much more, how are you making sure that you can continue to do that, you're keeping yourself sustainable?
Tough question. as far as I was concerned, I have someone in my staff assigned to follow that. And he gave me the heads up. He said, because this is your house, you're not paying rent. We're taking advantage of that. So we can, we pay top price for every ingredient, down to the salt. Because even the salt is mined from my great grandparents' salt beds, and my cousin takes care of it and gets it tested regularly that it has no impurities, and so it's very special salt. See, the whole point is that I just want to create the most incredible meal from the most common ingredients, and I am taking advantage of the fact that I have some advantages. I'm not sure if what I do can be replicated, because I have, as I said, I have advantages. I have a house there I don't have to pay rent for. I have some family money that I can use that would be, but for me, it's an investment. If I pay more for organic farmers and for suppliers who care about the product that they deliver, then you have healthier people. And healthier people leads to a healthier country, more productivity, safer food for everyone. That's my form of investment. And I think my thinking, fortunately, I've never had to worry about where I'm gonna live or where my next meal is from. Then I have taken that advantage and put it forward. And one of the things in my life is I have always questioned the logic of the capitalist system of constantly making a profit and then sucking it from wherever you can, by cutting corners, by robbing employees of their rightful wages, and by serving you food with very inferior, cheap ingredients, which is the norm, right? And I really was not very happy, because when I first got into Manila society and went back, and there are all these very famous chefs saying, "Oh, we support local farmers, we buy like organic food," and then I found out that their system is by auction. So farmers have to keep bidding, right? So they have to lower their prices and then for one time they might have cheap prices, right? And the restaurant will buy a huge amount of mushrooms or greens from them, but the next time it's not guaranteed, right? So because they have to keep outbidding the other farmers, and who knows, right, if they have to sell at such a price that they lost money. So what I do with my suppliers, I guarantee them, I know this is what you're going to charge me. I will buy from you regularly. You don't have to worry. You don't have to cheapen yourself. I will buy it. But see, I'm just a small player, right? And I can do it because it's a private dining. And it's not like I have to cook food every day. And I can only do it that way because I can only serve food and use those very expensive ingredients if I am guaranteed that someone's going to pay for it. So if there are no reservations or no one's going to buy it, I don't make it because I don't want to throw it out. For example, we use heirloom rice from the Cordilleras, right? It's very, very expensive but very difficult to grow. So when we cook it, we make sure people eat it or take it home. We do not throw anything away. So I don't know if this is a successful business model but I'm just doing it right now because I can do it. And as I said, I have advantages that not many have. So I cannot blame regular restaurants for not doing that because they don't have the advantages that I have. But since I have it, I will use it.
You're an exceptional business. And I really feel like your values are so forward and just embedded in everything that you just said. I think for organizations like ours, we have people just like Amy, who kind of take care of the structure. But for us, right, that structure is built to serve values. And so, and looking at the scale of World Kitchen, and the fact that those values grew into their organization is really, to me, a very, very good example of how how values forward organizations can thrive. Many of the examples that you gave are very similarly enacted in both our programs on the education side as well as in the farm operations themselves. It's the essence of our success is really that we ascribe to values of of partnership, of fairness, of integrity, of all of those things that you mentioned, except in Hawaiian. And and that like I think one of the things regarding the pandemic that made it very painfully obvious for our community and this specific context is just the widening of those disparities and how very little resilience we have when these external situations arise. And so that's what we're trying to move very quickly around in creating more of a sustaining model. So we are in year 4 of a 10-year strategic plan. And the plan iterates every year. And it's sort of an endeavor that all of our employees, all of our youth, all of our stakeholders work on every year to kind of refine and to create other opportunities to invite other people into this conversation of what nourishing food when we invest in that, what that could look like and what kinds of impacts from health to education to what now is kind of a crisis in our community is the emerging mental health issues and also the ongoing economic issues that are a part of our new reality. The fact that we haven't created enough local jobs and sustaining work, not just jobs, but work that is sustaining as well. So I think there's a lot to work on, but I think we have exemplars and we have models, and they're very near to us, and I think where for example, in our place, a place where foundations can help is to start to be actors that help to catalyze networks, versus, you know, trying to just, you know, fund one cause, but seeing how, you know, those agencies are working within these networks and across networks, to get work done. Because I think ultimately the community has the answers, and we just need to be engaged in that conversation. And I really appreciate, you know, what World Kitchen is doing to be empathetic listeners, and engaging their communities to be part of the solution, and really creating avenues to access that lived experience and that wisdom that exists already, right? We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but we do need to be mindful about how we engage in those conversations. And for us, you know, aloha and kapo aloha is the way that we can do that. And then, because it is a very important conversation, and it needs to be inclusive, and it needs to have address the healing, while we're talking about equity.
Anna, do you know if Kukui brings up a good point that World Central Kitchen has this amazing opportunity to be going into communities and learning? Is there a component of building networks or being able to, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. That's super crucial. And I think one way you do it is that you have someone that's doing that. And so, you know, that's mainly my job. My job is to maintain the essence and the heart, and the lived experience of the organization. And we have lots of talented people that, you know, kind of attend to the structural needs and the form, right? Because you need to have those detail-oriented people to execute and to make those things happen. And you know, so but I really love that we can also be innovative in the way that we people our structure. And so you know, it may not be ideal, but for us as a small organization that is pretty lean, you know, we lean into and have multiple roles, so that we're attending and we're in the dailiness. So I can go out there and go to the packing shed. They may not want me in the packing shed, but I can go in the packing shed and, you know, be put to work there, or go out on a Friday out into the fields with the youth and build people and build relationship out there while weeding or while planting something. They may not necessarily like my work. I enjoy working with them, but you know, being sort of having that like adaptability within your own organization, I think is really something very cool that everyone can do, right? We can share the work and share the storytelling around the work together. And I think it builds a great amount of compassion. And then because we still need to do the work of healing, and you know, you cannot be separate from that process. You have to engage together with our people to be in a process of healing. And when you do that, you get amazing outcomes.
You know, in our last 15 minutes, please unmute and feel free to jump in. I would love to hear, Anna, if World Central Kitchen is able to be a connector that way, and if that is part of the mission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the most kind of direct example of that aspect of the work is on our resilience side. We have several different programs that are aimed at longer term development and strengthening economies and communities in that way. Where our food producer network aims to invest in local food producers and to help them get either back on their feet or develop their business and entrepreneurial spirit for the first time. either in the aftermath of a crisis or not. So again, kind of empowering and bolstering the agency that local communities and local producers have to strengthen their own ecosystem there, and all the complexities that come with that, not, as everyone here has raised so many times, the complexity of the food industry and food justice work, but all of the different areas of community that are touched by food, whether that's fishers, farmers, distributors, delivery drivers, restaurants, patrons that are eating, right? It touches so many aspects. So our food producer network is one prime example of really investing in that aspect of building a community and building an economy. We have training programs, culinary training programs that try and teach culinary skills, chefs, bringing together chefs or cooks or folks that have never been experienced in that space to teach skills, learn from them as well about local traditions, local skills, kind of tricks of the trade. Our clean cooking program aims to move communities and chefs and cooks to more clean cooking resources and clean sources of energy. So again, kind of expanding from the focus on food and to a larger scope of kind of environmental health and community health in that way. So that brings in a lot of different players, right? And a lot of different networks and relationships to make that come to life. I think that it is certainly a proactive part of our work, but it's also inherent to being in this space is connecting people. You must. Certainly our resilience side is really consciously aimed at that. On our disaster side, when you're in a disaster setting or in a low resource setting, you may be cut off entirely from communications. The bridges may be washed out, right? You have to get really creative in the ways that you're serving and providing for people's needs. And so, as we have talked about so many times, the answers are kind of there in the community, and you have to look outside of yourself and your traditional ideas or traditional models to get creative with how we move forward from this moment. And so I think that kind of permeates through all of our work, is this the success of this work is reliant on building relationships, on building networks, on bringing more people into the conversation and more ideas into the conversation. And I keep saying it, but listening to those ideas and building upon yourself. I mean, I think a question has been about the sustainability of that work. And I think the more people you bring into the fold and the more people, we started at the beginning of this talking about people recognizing their worth, the more people that begin to recognize their worth through this work, the stronger that foundation is, right? The more sustainable that becomes as more people believe in that and see that their value in that process and their place in the process. And in their own story. So I think that that's, again, both kind of a conscious part of the work and just inherently being in the space of food and the space of aid and the space of community building. It becomes sustainable as you open up to more people and bring more people into it.
So I think I have two more questions, and I'm not sure in what order to ask. Actually, I know what I want. Can you all say what you think the average person can do to support the values that you all have brought up? What is the simplest thing that people can do as a consumer to make everything better?
As far as I'm concerned, I think it would be great if, I deal with customers, and I interact with them on Facebook, Instagram. I think for me, the most important thing is they recognize the value of what they get from me, and if they start to understand that there was care in producing that dish. There was a lot of thought as to what kind of the quality of the ingredients and the process, the cooking process, which respects the ingredients. So I think the most important thing I would recommend to people is they start asking questions. They start looking at the food that they're eating. Where did it come from? You know, why does it taste like this? What went in there? You know, a lot of times we put in really special stuff in there. But if people don't really pay attention, then it just, you know, just gets wasted. But whenever we put something together, it means something.
Right.
There's some thought, like, you know, like for example, we, you know, for special occasions, we buy heritage meats, you know, from Heritage Foods, because it supports certain farmers and ranchers that want to preserve certain breeds of, you know, so we're not just like producing animals and, you know, slaughtering them, you know, like, you know, we support farmers and ranchers that take care of animals and make sure that they have a happy life and they're healthy, and you know, and at least these are small farms, you know, they're not gigantic corporate farms that produce you know, unhealthy meats and who destroy the earth. So it's like even choices like that are very important for the customer to understand, and that there is a story behind everything. And we were even, especially in Manila, in Malate, when we were doing our meals, every meal is a complete story from beginning to end. And my staff and my wait staff, but the kitchen and wait staff are very well trained to tell the story. And I know that that's the most rewarding thing when the customers write back to me and say, oh my God, we love the story of how that rice came about and what went into this, and how this is food from Muslim Mindanao that, you know, forgotten, you know, part of our culture and our history. This is how a particular segment of our people cook and eat, and we don't know anything about it. You know, and what's great is they write to me and they re-articulate what they've learned. So to me, that's rewarding. Here in the States, it's because it's very different, right? We don't get to interact with people. But then I think because we've been doing this for 27 years here in New York, we have developed a good group of customer base who know us and who respond to it, you know. But I think if more people would start questioning and looking at the food that they get and ask those questions, I think it would be a lot better for the food industry. You know,
You know, this is very anecdotal, of course, but and New York centric, but being in New York during COVID and all of the shortages and all of the panic around being able to buy food and have food delivered, for me, my journey was finding ways of getting meat and getting produce outside of you know, not being able to go to Whole Foods to pick something up. And so I saw that there were a lot of programs that came up of subscription boxes for, you know, a meat farm, or, and so the perception would
Yeah.
be that people did have to ask those questions in that
Right.
time. So has there been more support for smaller farms and smaller vendors, and is that um has there has that community been uplifted, and is that being sustained even though the pandemic is you know, sort of winding down, that people are able
Yeah.
to go out?
I mean, I think it was already in process here in YNI, and in particular for our organization. The scaling process started in 18. So, you know, at the moment we're building a pretty large facility, you know, and we're transitioning from our repurposed chicken sheds that serves as our processing and packing facility now to an actual facility dedicated for that purpose. And you know, I believe the pandemic did create a lot more opportunities, not just for our farm, but definitely for other farms. The food banks, I think they found that their work expanded, maybe deep into other audiences. The farm up the road from us, their food hub operations expanded. And I think they have over 300 small farms, you know, sending product through them. Definitely the aggregators that were putting produce and meats and other kinds of things into boxes, they definitely expanded. So I think that pivot allowed a lot more light and a lot more conversation, a lot more people who were disinterested in the importance of having a healthy and functioning food system kind of become involved. If I were to say what is it that you do, you know, maybe not as a consumer, but as a human being, is that, you know, start to interact with your environment. You know, I am Aina. Aina being the word for land in Hawaiian, and I mean food. Aina literally means that which feeds. And so where does your food come from? It comes from our hard work, but it's in relationship and in the interaction with our land primarily, and our water, and you know, and everything else connected to it. So I feel, you know, that folks can do that. They can start to interact and grow a relationship with the land and the resources that are around them. It'll naturally lead them to explore and ask questions about, you know, where are they buying from now? Who else can they support? You know, because really the money is a means to an end. It is one way, but you know, folks can, you know, do work. We've had work trades and all kinds of different, you know, ways of our food getting out there that I don't think we would have considered otherwise. And so for us, it was an immense opportunity to kind of shift and grow our agency, but also to invite other folks to engage with us on this quest to make our food systems better. We do have lots of networks that we participate on, you know, nationally as well as locally. That systems work is where we're kind of having these conversations, and the hope is, right, through policy and various other ways, you know, is bringing the needed resources so that farmers and producers, as well as all of the folks in that value chain, can begin to make those changes sustainable. So I think we're on the right path. But connect with Aina first. Aina is your family. Aina is actually an old word for family, that which feeds.
Well, you know, our time in Hawaii, I never had a relationship to the earth or to nature. I was born in Queens. grew up on Long Island, and it took our whole time in Hawaii for me to really feel what it meant to be connected to your food, connected to the earth, connected to the sky, connected to the moon, and to come back to New York City and spend days not being able to see the sky or being able to see the moon. It is much of the country is disconnected from, they don't have that opportunity to actually feel how at one we are with everything around us, and that leading to being at one with your fellow human beings. So I think that that's a powerful idea, and if there are ways to help people feel that when they don't have access to it, I mean, that's really like the difficult journey.
Right.
Yeah, I, as everyone has said these pieces now, the connectedness feels like a common thread through each of these answers, right? If I were to give my input on what we as individuals can do, all of what's already been said, certainly educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself. It's a constant journey for me. But finding what you connect to, and to your point, Nancy, I think that's been a huge theme through this pandemic and before and after. But finding what you are connected to and what you care about, what moves you, I think points you towards that sustainability of whatever it is, right? Of continuing on, even in times of hardship or when you feel like you can't or don't know how to, finding whatever it is you connect to, if it's the land and the food, or one aspect of that. You love mushrooms, educate yourself as much as you can about mushrooms and the source of that, right? And I think from that, really, for me, that's been a real practice through this time and in my life, but particularly with the pandemic and with this work, in all that's so overwhelming, find the piece that you can connect to, and that will ultimately lead you to being more engaged and growing that sphere of connectedness and people who care about the same things or care about things that you might never have known about and become interested in and become passionate about, right? And from what kind of mushroom do I love can become what kind of policy am I fighting for, right? Yeah. And I think that's been a really beautiful thing to learn through this work and through this time is the many ways the Lower East Side Girls Club and learning about their neighborhood in new ways, right? And us being guests to that neighborhood and becoming to learn about that. I think finding that connectedness on whatever scale you can will be a really strong thread of change.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. This was really incredible. And for me, it's such an incredible opportunity to reconnect with Kukui and to meet Anna and to get this deeper story from you, Amy, after being a fan of Cinderlon and Purple Yam. And I'm really honored. Thank you so much. I don't want this to be the end. I hope we can
definitely not
do a follow-up. I was thinking that something that would be interesting when Amy was talking about understanding the story behind something, like being able to do the anatomy of each of your work, like hearing about a meal that Amy served, or to hear about the process of growing one type of produce on
or
the
growing
farm.
a young leader, maybe.
Yes, I would love to follow up, and then to follow World Central Kitchen through one iteration, like Lower East Side Girls Club, just to show what we're all talking about, the story that happens behind what many take for granted. And so I'd love to try to do that. But I mean, amazingly, this was 2 hours. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This actually ended up being, the panel went through a lot of shifting, and I'm so happy that I ended up talking to the three of you tonight. It means the world to me.
Can I offer a
Thank you,
mihi
Nancy.
to close?
Yes.
And the mihi is instructive because, to be honest, I didn't know what to expect. And when we're asked to be on panels, we're often asked about, you know, what are our impacts, what are our outcomes, and in this case, we really wanted to just talk about what actions are we taking in food in order to nourish healthier communities. So I'd like to share this. It's a prophecy, and it talks about, you know, all things that are not of us, you know, falling, and those things that all of the good things that we talked about today, being able to rise up. But that the most important thing is what you talked about, which is, you know, connecting and those relationships. Aina, we are Aina, and Aina is us. We are the food, and food is us. And so in that way, we can connect and continue to have that relationship to one another. And Kuanakapaya, and it will stand, and it will be strong, and it will be, like you said, Amy, our legacy for our future generations, that they will know their history. They will know their history through food. It goes like this. E hona o luna e iana o lalo e huiana na mo kue kuana kapaya. E hona o luna e pia o lalo e huiana na mo kue kuana kapaya. E hona o luna e iana o lalo e huiana na mo e kuana kapaya. E ola no ka aina. Everyone say e ola no.
Eola no,
I don't know.
Ka'aina.
Ka'aina.
And 2 claps.
You say
There we
kain
go.
na, which means let's eat in Tagalog.
Hey, yes. It's about
Yeah.
that time for me. Mahalo, Amy.
Okay, thank you. You all have given me hope.
Hi. So much. Thank you, Anna. Nancy,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
everyone.
So lovely to be with you.
Bye.
Aloha.
Bye.
Wiho.
Aloha.
Wiho.
Bye.